Welcome to Spectrum Days, the podcast where we ruin our childhood memories of games we used to play, with me and my cousin Phil. So,
hello.
Hey Phil, what game are we going to try and remember today?
We're going to try and remember, I think that's probably quite true actually, we're going to try and remember Speedball, which came out on the Amiga, and I think it's REST back in 1988. What do you remember, Chris?
I remember Speedball 2, Brutal Deluxe, much more than Speedball 1. So I would have played Speedball 2 a lot more than Speedball 1. But I would have played both on the Amiga, on the Commodore Amiga, and that would have been with my trusty blue Kempston Pro joystick. And I can remember it being a 2-player game, so it must have been a lot of fun with friends. And now, when we do get to play it, it'll probably be a 1-player.
Because we haven't got any friends.
Exactly. Too old for friends now. Speedball was made by the Bitmap Brothers, and all of their games just had a feeling, a style. They were very stylistic games. The music was always great. The imagery was great. I mean, they kind of set themselves up as almost a rock band. I think if they were interviewed, if they were in the magazines of the time, they even played up to that kind of part. They wore leather jackets, I think, sunglasses, and appeared as if they were a kind of rock band.
Yeah, that's right. We are a well, bad, well, wicked game-making trio.
That's not even our helicopter. That's Robert Maxwell's.
Don't tell them that, Dave. For crying out loud. No, it's our helicopter, all right? We earned it. It's ours.
It's Maxwell's.
No, it's not Maxwell's. For crying out loud. God.
They weren't really brothers. They were a team of developers working together.
You see, Dave, you listening to this? This is what I've been trying to tell you about. We are not brothers, okay? I sound totally different to you. I live in a different house. My house has got a woman in it, and that's my mum. You've got a house, and that's got a woman in it. That's your mum. They are two different people, okay? We are not related. Give me strength.
So yeah, I mean, a general kind of feeling of top quality games, and Speedball is a futuristic sports game, a violent sports game where you play one team against the other. I can't remember how many players you have on your own team. 3?
It's not very many, is it? It's quite a sort of small game. Certainly Speedball 1 was, a handful of people at most on each side, yeah.
Yeah, and the general idea is you just throw a ball between your players, and then you have to throw it into a goal to get a point, and you have to get more points than your opponent within the time limit and to win. And then you can, I guess there was a league table or a competition that you progressed through.
Yeah, I vaguely remember there was a sort of campaign similar to football games, and that you sort of, I think there was money on the pitch that you could collect, and obviously you got sort of rewarded with cash for beating whoever you were playing, and you could then improve the stats of your team. So there was that sort of football management type element to it, where you'd make your team better than they were in the game before, assuming you got enough cash. You could up the stamina, or until we play it, I can't remember all the functions, but it was along those lines. I've got this one on Master System, which is where I remember playing it most, though I did play it first, much as Chris did, on the Amiga, which I didn't own at the time, but it was at my friend's, and I remember playing it, and it was the Bitmap Brothers. It was funny, they sort of, like Chris was saying, they were so sort of famous, really, sort of on the Amiga. That was kind of their home, and they produced a whole load of really good games, and they all looked the same but didn't. Every game they made was totally different. Like their first game, Xenon, was like a shoot 'em up, and then to Speedball, I mean, two very, very different games. And then there are other games like platform games and all sorts. So every game they made was very, very different, but you could see it was a Bitmap Brothers game. They all had this sort of metallic, shiny, look to them. They're very distinctive, but the version that I owned and played the most, the original Speedball, was on the Master System, which I've got in my hands here. I've got it on physical. I'll just read you the thing on the back, actually. The sport of the future. Speedball is the action sport of the 21st century, which made me laugh earlier on today when I was reading that. I thought, that's now. And it's nothing like the world's nothing like this game, but the sport of the 21st century, wearing spiked armor bodywear, which actually, although you can't see of us, one of us is wearing that, so I suppose it's quite true. Helmet, and I'll let you decide who might be wearing the spiked body armor. Helmet and gloves. You'll go face to face with some of the ugliest, meanest goons in the world. Dodge neck-breaking tackles and bone-crunching body slams to pass a solid steel ball towards your opponent's goal. Hammer your foe enough times, and he'll cry for mercy. Why wouldn't you buy that?
Why did they make it a solid steel ball?
Because it's a future sport game from the 21st century, and we're all wearing spiked armor.
I also reminded myself about the game by looking at the Commodore Amiga A Visual Compendium, and there's some nice images there in that book, a lovely book if you're a Commodore Amiga fan. And as you were saying, it's just that all of the Bitmap Brothers games have just an ambience, a feeling that you can tell it's one of their games, and the music in general is what comes to my mind, that they just had excellent soundtracks.
Yeah, their look is unmistakable, and the sound as well. I mean, they were sort of one of the first people, particularly with Xenon 2 was the one that I think we were talking about prior to recording today, which featured Bomb the Bass with Mega Blast, and it was the whole song. I mean, it was, they basically recreated the entire track, which we'd never heard that before. And I remember on the Amiga, it was 2 discs. I think you loaded the first disc, and that song played during the loading. And if you didn't put in the second disc, the song would continue to play. And I seem to remember us doing that and just using it as if we were just listening to a tape. You just put on Xenon 2 and just not put in disc 2, and it would just continue to play Bomb the Bass.
And around the time, was there a film with one of these kind of futuristic sports when they were roller derby? Yeah, rollerball, which apparently, when doing the research for this, I couldn't quite work it out. Everyone was saying it was influenced by, but I think they were totally separate and sort of came out at not quite the same time, from what I can tell. But they certainly, you would be totally, not blamed if you thought, oh, that game is come from that film. Well, hold up. Rollerball came out in 1975.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so it could well have done. It could well have done. But I seem to remember, so when I looked it up, I think they said that it was, just coincidence. But you'll have to take their word for it, I suppose.
Well, must have been in their subconscious.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be hard not to,
So you have played it in the last 30 years then?
I've played it in the last 30 years, yes, but a long time ago. My Master System games I bought a long time ago as far as collecting goes. Mega Drive, if everyone's been watching the other podcasts, I've been buying those more recently. So I have played some of the Mega Drive titles more recently. But the Master System, that copy of Speedball, I probably haven't played it for, 10 years. In fact, the sticker that's on it, there's a sticker from the shop, Arcadia Home Entertainment, pre-owned, tested, $2.99. So, God knows when I bought it.
So, did the shop get many cartridges? Did you
Speedball was very, very popular. I think, as I sort of put in the notes there when I was sort of thinking about this, when we were knew we were going to be doing this for the podcast, that because it was Bitmap, but Bitmap Brothers was the thing. As Chris pointed out, that if you do look them up, you will just see photos of them looking like cool dudes. They look like a not very good boy band. So yeah, they were the draw. If you were Amiga or an STO, particularly Amiga, you just saw the name Bitmap, you bought the game, you knew it was going to be good, and they all reviewed very, very well, but they were all very hard games. I mean, Xenon 2, Mega Blast, which we were just talking about with the bomber-based music on, really hard shooter. I mean, very hard. Gods was another popular one that they did, which was a sort of platformer, again, very, very hard. Is it Chaos Engine or something it was called? Was that the other one that was sort of running around shooting stuff? Again, very, very good, but very, very hard. But they all had that amazing aesthetic, and you knew you were going to get a good game that was going to be a good value because you'd be playing it for hours because they were rock hard games. And I think, again, in the research, I did find that one of the main guys that I think he headed up the company eventually, he did say that and admitted that their games were hard, and they made them hard, which is also why I thought it was quite interesting in a weird kind of way that we're looking at Speedball, because Speedball on a single player, which is unfortunately how we're going to play it, none of our partners are going to want to play with us or play Speedball. So it's very unlikely that we're going to get to experience it too, player darlings. It seems dreadfully unlikely. So so we're going to be playing by ourselves with our joysticks, waggling away furiously.
But you seem to be alluding to the fact that it might be easy just because.
I shall tell you why. I have evidence. I have with me. Another copy of Mean Machines, which is Mean Machines issue number 5.
Pristine condition.
It is. It's a very nice copy, and I've bookmarked the page because they reviewed it on the Master System, the very copy, very version that I've got. I think it is Matt and Julian Rignall who reviewed it, and the score was pretty good. They gave it 79%. A brilliant two-player game, but completely pathetic in single-player mode. And Julian Jazz Rignall's comment, this is a game of two halves and no mistake. As a simultaneous two-player game, it's superb, combining fast and furious and pretty violent gameplay with excellent graphics. However, when you play it in single-player mode, it's virtually useless. The computer team is a complete joke. This sounds great. It's our sort of game. It's going to be so easy. I beat him 10-0 on my first game and continued to win time and time again until I gave up with disgust. It's a massive shame. If this had been play tested properly and given a decent computer opponent, it would be utterly brilliant. As it stands, it's recommended only if you always have a second player on hand. If you're likely to be playing on your own, give it a miss. There simply isn't enough challenge to keep you occupied for more than a few hours. I can't wait. It's going to be the only game that we find easy, and I'm going to win 10-0.
Could you dig up a review of R-Type and Ghouls and Ghosts? Because he seems to think that just gameplay testing could have meant they would have easily been able to make the game harder, which is ridiculous because that's the artificial intelligence, right? The AI or the way they would program the enemy team. It's quite tricky. It's quite tricky to make that a competitive kind of thing. Whilst R-Type, it would have been a lot easier to make easier if they play tested that a bit more and just reduce some of the enemies or reduce the rate of fire, etc., etc. So all the games we've played so far have been exceedingly hard. Sounds like we might get an easy game. So the objective will be for me to beat the AI 10-0, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We shall see.
I mean, obviously, that is just Speedball, and it's Speedball on the Master System. I can't, for the life of me, remember whether it was the same as that on the other formats. That is very specifically a review for the Master System version, though ironically, of course, that Master System version came out 2 years after the original game. So
Right.
who knows whether they just ported it because it was easy to port and they didn't sort of bother doing it. You know, there was all the opportunity there to have put that right if that was a fault in the original Amiga and ST or whatever version. I don't know.
Like I say, that would not have been an easy. It's not an easy fix. It's not. So
Can I just make the goal smaller?
well, I could have done. I suppose so. You could have done. They could have done horrible things like make your team just slower than the other team, or something. But the whole idea of making the other team appear sentient and more difficult in that way, I guess, was quite a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, but that game, so it's got that sort of inbuilt thing of you do well, you get money, you improve your team. What's the point in that if your first go? I mean, this is the thing is though. This is Julian Jazz Rignall, 1978 winner of Centipede Championships or whatever it was. Yeah, this is a guy who was winning awards for playing arcade games. He's a very good player and probably still is. If he's listening, I hope he appreciates that we're ripping into his 30-year review. So, hey, kids, it's easy. You'll be fine.
A game we can't even remember.
I actually got UK and world records in Defender, Pole Position and Crossfire. And I also got Golden Joystick Award of this idiot. But Speedball, that's quite easy. I completed it.
I probably only really remember Speedball 2. so yeah. Well, yeah, it won't be easy though, will it?
No. Nothing so far has been easy, but we've been playing really hard games. Charles Rignall has assured me. There, in black and white. Actually, not black and white, neon blue and pink, as the days were back in the 90s, when you could get away with weird colours. That it's easy, and that we will do well on our first go. Guaranteed.
Well, that sounds good.
For your money back. And I know that was $29.99 back in 1990 to buy Speedball, which seemed like an awful lot of money, actually, for what is quite a simple game of sort of five-a-side football, sort of, which is sort of all it was.
Yeah.
I mean, a good one, and I liked it, and that's why I bought it back then, and that's why I bought it again now. It was good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd have been playing it with other people. I probably must have played it on my own, but as well. But I don't remember. But yeah, I remember playing Brutal Deluxe again when my friend's house had the Amiga. I sort of remember us playing that more in the sense of playing it as a group.
Yeah.
There'd be several of us there playing that. And I remember the music for that. And the reason I remember that was the first game music that I recorded and actually put it onto tape because I liked it so much. But I didn't have a tape player. So I used to have to get my dad's keys and go into his car when he got home from work and play it in the car. And I distinctly remember listening to Speedball 2 music in my dad's
What's that in the car?
Yeah, because it had a brilliant sound system.
Can we remember anything else before we go off and play this one?
No, actual memories of it. What I've just said is what I remember. I am slightly sad that we aren't going to experience how this game was designed for. That's my slight regret with this. But we have yet to play a game that is 2-player, and you didn't always have someone there to play a 2-player game with, and you had to play against the computer. I mean, that's how games worked. The programmers didn't just make it 2-player and that's it. You know, if you played it on your own, the other team just doesn't move. You know what I mean? Because there's no one else there playing, would be really weird. So they did bother to make these games 2-player. So it'd be interesting to see. And Jazz Rignall says it's going to be easy, which is great. Because I don't think I can stand playing another hard game again. I just can't do it.
So yeah, I don't think I can remember anything else about this game. I got this general feeling that it was great. I probably played it with my friends, maybe against producer John quite a few times as well. Got a bit of a mixture between Speedball 1, Speedball 2, so I'm looking forward to playing this, or maybe looking at both. But yeah, I don't think I've got anything else. And do you, Phil?
Yeah, well, as you say, I can't really remember much more about it other than, as I say, being very much falling in love with the Bitmap Brothers and what they produce for the Amiga, and they are very iconic, and I think that's partly really why we chose this. I think those of you out there who want to have a go at playing it along with us, please do. We're going to take a pause now. You won't have to wait long. We'll be back in a few seconds. For you, that is. For us, it'll be a few days of playing Speedball on our own and crying and lamenting that we don't have any friends. So if you'd like to press pause, please do play the game. If I can find it somewhere where you can play it, I'll put it in the links below. If not, use your imaginations, and then come back and see whether you still like it or not. And we're back. Well, thank you for those of you who did actually press pause and played along. I hope you managed to find it somewhere. And for those of you who didn't, don't worry. Me and Chris are now going to lament about yet another game that we thought we liked back in the 80s or whenever the heck this came out, and are now going to basically say that we don't like it now and we hate it, and we don't know why we're doing this podcast, ruining our childhoods, which really should be the tagline. Instead of Spectrum Days games we played, Spectrum Days games we now hate. I think that should basically be it. So yeah, we were playing Speedball. Chris, where did you play it? On what format did you play it, and what did you think?
Speedball 1, Speedball on the Master System, and Speedball 2, Brutal Deluxe on the Mega Drive. So So I think we've been playing. I think I was playing the wrong version. I think the good one was the Amiga, because the ones I played, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, this is what we were saying in the first half, and it's supposed where we remember it from was the Amiga.
Yeah, and you could tell you're not playing the Amiga version because you don't hear anyone calling out ice cream. There's no ice cream salesman.
Now you had to remind me of this off camera. I'd forgotten all about that. That in the Amiga version, there's a lot more sort of crowd noise and atmosphere, and the difference between that and Brutal Deluxe on the Mega Drive, it does make it quite clear that version on the Mega Drive. I don't know if anyone did play along with us and played the Mega Drive version. If they've got memories of the Amiga one, it's quite different. I mean, the basic format's the same, the way the pitch is laid out, but the detail in the characters and the sound, that theme tune that I think I mentioned about that I really liked and had on tape was definitely the Amiga version. As soon as I loaded up the Brutal Deluxe on the Mega Drive, I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is not where I remember playing this game.
And now I've got to try and remember if on the Mega Drive, on the Amiga version, if you could use the mouse to navigate the team management menus, because if so, it makes sense, because I found the menu system, the UI, absolutely atrocious on the Mega Drive. It was. Yeah,
I agree.
It was just difficult to navigate. It was, style over substance. It may look cool, but I just found the menu system really strange.
Yeah, I mean, this is again something we sort of touched on off camera just before starting up again, that the difference between that sort of using as you say, the mouse on the Amiga and things like that, it just shows that I think that port from the Amiga over to the Mega Drive, they just it was just cut and paste, and they didn't think about those sorts of ease of use sort of choices. You got sort of one button. They didn't even make it multi-button, did they? Because the game, a bit like other games we play, could benefit from having another move mapped to another button. Whereas because the Amiga, particularly playing it with a joystick, you had one button, a fire button. So all they've done with the Mega Drive is just ported the game over, whereas the Mega Drive essentially has got 4 buttons. You've got a pause button and 3 action buttons, A, B, and C. But they haven't taken advantage of that at all. So you're doing all the actions within game and then in your menus, like you were just talking about, all with one button. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. So you've literally, for those of you who haven't played it, you've literally got one button. When you've got the ball, you can tap it to make a body level throw. If you hold it down a little bit, you can throw a ball up in the air.
You sort of do a lob.
If you haven't got lob. Yeah, if you haven't got the ball, you just do a slide tackle, which seems to make you move a bit faster as well in a way. So you just end up mashing
your slide. Yeah, you sort of carry on a bit, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just mashing the button. So although that's probably why I scored far too many home goals or own goals. But let's bring it back. Did you play the Master System? You played the Master System one, right?
Yeah. The interesting thing about going back to, the interesting thing about going back to this, it really brought back memories that obviously the first part of our podcast is we talk about just what we can remember. And this I hadn't remembered until I put the game on. I suddenly realized that, I'd played it on the Amiga, liked it at my friend's house. It was probably Brutal Deluxe. I'm fairly sure now that was what I'd played. And because I didn't have an Amiga, but I did have the Master System, I wanted the game. I liked it that much. I wanted to be able to play it. It's like, I can. Oh, wow, yeah, Speedball, that's the one. And so I bought it. And of course, it's the original Speedball and not Brutal Deluxe for a start. And not all games are terrible the second time or the first time. Sometimes the second game can be worse than the first or vice versa. But in this case, Speedball 1 is pretty basic and it isn't as good as Brutal Deluxe. And also the version on the Master System, although it did well, and I did read you out the review in Mean Machines, it got a good review, and it was good back then, and I wasn't disappointed back then when I was a kid and had Speedball. It's like, brilliant, I can play that game that my mate's got at his house on his Amiga. And of course, the Amiga seemed amazing back then. It was 16-bit. I mean, comparing it to the Master System, it was certainly a far superior machine. That's not to say all the games on the Master System were terrible. There's quite a lot of good games on there that probably are better than some of the Amiga games, but it really did remind me. It's like, oh yeah, that's why I bought it. I wanted to be able to play that game that was on the Amiga, and playing it now, it just doesn't compare. I think I was explaining off mic. I tried playing the sort of ROM version of Speedball, the Master System Speedball, but I know it's corrupted, didn't work or whatever. So I did have to dig out my Master System from somewhere in the loft and put in that cartridge that I've got and play the original. So the footage you're actually probably watching now, if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, is actually from the Master System, and that's why it doesn't look as good, because I'm playing it through an upscaler and then through the capture device and blah blah blah. So yeah, it doesn't look quite as good as sort of HD ROMs do when you're using something like a Raspberry Pi or whatever. It's pretty slow, even though I've got my Master System is modded, so it was actually playing at 60 hertz. So of course, thinking back to me being a poor little child playing on the Master System, that would have been at 50 hertz, so even slower than the version that I was playing to capture this footage. And of course, it would have been letterboxed, so it would have been a smaller playfield to be able to look at and a slower speed. It must have been awful, but I don't remember it being awful. But it must have been awful. So that version of the Master, I mean, it was playable. I'll tell you what, though. Comparing that, then I played Brutal Deluxe on the Mega Drive. That one on the Master System is an admirable conversion. The Mega Drive version of Brutal Deluxe is not great. It doesn't do the game justice, but the Master System version of Speedball 1 does do the game justice. I will speak in defense of the Master System. Wow. It's a good conversion. It's a better conversion than the Mega Drive version of Brutal Deluxe is. I will give it that.
But who cares if it was a good conversion or not? The point is it fun? Is it fun?
I had fun for 10 minutes.
Yeah, would you want to play? Would you want to play it again and again and again? We worked out with inflation. With inflation, this game cost £30 on the Master System, and with inflation,
No, £30 when it came out.
Yeah, £30 when it came out. With inflation, that means in 2022, that £30 would now be £60. It's paying £60. Back in the day, it was the equivalent of paying £60 today to get Speedball 1 on the Master System. So there's just so little content or replayability compared to what £60 can get you today. And I just found it, it was so clunky. But then again, I'm probably bitter because I didn't beat the CPU, the computer, 10-0 on my first ever go.
And who did?
Jazz Rignall.
Jazz Rignall. It's all your fault,
you?
Jazza.
Yeah, 10-0. The AI is terrible. 10-0. I don't know. It was too clunky.
There's nothing clunky about these games. It's you. You've got old. You've been spoilt by modern games that hold your hand through all those tutorials that you get in games now. You get to about the halfway stage before they even let go of your hand. And then you can buy loot boxes to get bigger guns or get you through the level that you can't quite get through. Ha! And you decided to do a podcast about games from the past and you can't even play them anymore. Why don't you go home and cry to your mummy? Speedball 2, Brutal Deluxe. I completed it.
It looks quite nice.
Scoring. It does. It does look good. Yeah. I
like the colours, the palette. It's quite kind of bright, the Master System version. It gets more kind of gritty in Speedball 2, but Speedball 1's kind of brighter. But yeah. Scoring is the angles. There's just not, so you can only go in 8 different directions. There's no analog stick, of course. So you're stuck to 8 different directions and you just, even in Speedball 2, my main go-to for scoring a goal is throwing a lob, then jumping up, getting as it rebounds and then smashing through the goalkeeper, or throwing it just directly at the goalkeeper and then smashing into the goalkeeper and then scoring. It's like not much skill. You don't get many.
There's a payoff for violence. Basically.
Yeah, there's not much like, I'm going to play it off to this guy, cross it in, jump up and score at an angle. No, just smash the goalkeeper out of the way. That's the only way to play.
Yeah, if you can get that tail end of catching the ball when you're doing your slide, your sort of slide tackle as you catch the ball, as you say, you can knock the goalie over then. But you can get it in. The only other way I found of consistently scoring, but this is on the Master System version, it does tend to vary from version to version, but certainly on the Master System, is keeping the goalkeeper. They tend to totally mirror your movements. If you move over to the left a tiny little bit, they move. The computer's goalkeeper is just a... Sorry, you'll probably need a beep there. But if you can get him to go over to the extreme of one end and run towards the goalie, and then just at the last second do a diagonal to the open part of the goal, you can get it in. But it's really hard. It is very hard. It is much easier if you can, as you say, lob the ball towards, get hold of it, bash the goalie over, bang, and it's in. Because there's a bit like with a lot of computer games, there's that thing when you attack an opponent, they're sort of out of the game for, probably half a second, where they're on the floor rolling and they sort of can't tackle, they can't get hold of the ball. But there are the pickups, aren't there? They're the things you can get. I think you can turn the ball into a weapon. Is it a double flashing W on the pitch or something like that? There's a few power-ups.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I quickly moved on to Brutal Deluxe, and on that one, you throw the ball. There's something on the side of the pitch. There's like 5 stars, so you can get extra points by hitting those stars. There's a loop that you can throw the ball into, and it kind of loops back round and comes out. You get some points for that. And near those things, there's a point on the wall where if you throw the ball into it, the ball becomes orange, and then you can throw the ball at your opponent and they kind of get knocked over. Yeah. So there are those powers up, and of course you've got to get the coins as quickly as you can, so that you can then try and upgrade your team. So the meta game, or the if you're playing on your own on a league, what you want to be doing is improving your team by upgrading their stats or buying new players. And once I bought my first new player, that's when I thought the game became a bit more fun as the players became a bit faster, and then I could run around and score a bit better. But I was just being beaten. I think the first 3 games I lost until I managed to sign up a new player. Then I went on a winning streak.
Yeah. Interestingly, after playing the Mega Drive version of Brutal Deluxe, and then, as I say, sort of realizing that this is not the Amiga version, I thought, well, I wasn't even sure, and I certainly hadn't replayed it. I never owned it and hadn't remembered this by then. I'd probably moved on to something else, but they did actually bring out Brutal Deluxe on the Master System, and I thought, okay, for completionist sake and for the sake of the video, so you're probably now watching it.
No way.
I know it is on the Master. I thought, okay, well, I better have a look. And going straight from playing it onto the Mega Drive, and again, I was amazed. It's a fantastic conversion, and again, this is what they didn't do on the Mega Drive. It's much more built from the ground up. I think they've obviously had to. I think if you look actually at games on the Amiga and games on the Mega Drive, they're quite similar in style, the sort of cohesiveness of characters, the sort of the levels of parallax, there's something about the look and feel of games on the Amiga and the Mega Drive. They're quite similar in a sort of complete opposite way. You could not say that the Amiga and the Super Nintendo look similar. There isn't that same comparison, but for some reason the Mega Drive and the Amiga, there's a bit of similarity there. So I mean, obviously you'd have to talk to the people involved in making it, but it looks much more like a cut and paste with Brutal Deluxe from Amiga to Mega Drive, or even like sometimes they did where you ended up with the port of the ST coming out on consoles. That happened quite a lot, where you'd get a successful sort of Amiga title, but for some reason the consoles would get this sort of odd version that was ported over from the ST. But the Master System version of Brutal Deluxe is actually really, really good, and I actually found it slightly easier to play single player against the computer AI, and the progression that Chris is just talking about, that collecting of the coins and making your players' stats go up, the sort of management side, it was almost like a sort of football manager type mechanic to it, was actually better on the Master System. And I'm just really, really pleased. I'm just so pleased that the Master System is that machine that I had a great love for back then, and that was the machine I had when Chris had the Amiga and he was playing this sort of thing. I had the Master System. I'm just amazed that Brutal Deluxe was that good on there. I'm still not saying it is a great game that I could now spend loads of time playing. I think most people listening to the podcast are probably gathering our point that we weren't necessarily happy with our experience in going back to playing Speedball on the Master System and the Mega Drive. I don't think either of us are probably going to be playing it ever again. And I think a big part of it is like we hinted at the beginning. It is not a fun single player experience. I'm not sure I could go through a whole campaign playing it and upping my characters. I'm not sure I could do it. Yeah, there's no aftertouch. Once you throw that ball, it's gone. There's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Aftertouch, that would have been good. But of course, in those days, we did have kickoff and sensible soccer. So that kind of stuff, I'm not quite sure now the dates when those games were released, but Aftertouch was a thing. Kickoff, you could kick. When you took a kick, you would be able to swerve the ball left and right. Those were great. You could, and they were also vertical, because that was funny. Like playing the game with the kids, they're kind of like, well, I don't know where my other players are. There's no indicate. There's a small white kind of indicator that indicates where your other player might be off screen. So you can try and string.
You're lucky if they're on screen, though.
Yeah. So you could try and string a pass, but it's funny because now I realise also today you might be playing games on a widescreen monitor, so the aspect ratio is different to what TVs were, right? So I presume, although FIFA was always left and right, But there were more games where you were playing vertical. I think Kickoff is also vertical. So Speedball's vertical. And I wonder if during the development they ever tried with a left and right horizontal kind of pitch. Because I wonder if you would have seen more to make those passes. I think that's just missing because you can't string together any team play. But it was a bit more fun playing against someone. I think those really are my Spectrum days memories, or my video game memories of being,
me too.
With friends. You're on the same sofa or sat at the same desk playing 2-player games. Or later on, on the PlayStation 1, maybe Pro Evolution Soccer. Those 2-player games, those are some amazing moments there.
We shall ask him. He's there on Twitter. We'll tell him, look, we've done this on the back of your review, mate.
Yeah, but it is
Meme Machines issue 5, February, number 5. It's sat here next to me, Chazza. You say, I want to see you do it now. I want to see you reply to us on Twitter with a video of you playing the Master System version, getting 10-0. No editing.
It's a challenge.
Was that vertical as well?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think even Match Day back on the Spectrum, that would have been vertical. I played that a lot. Match Day. I think horizontal, Emlyn Hughes International Soccer. I think that. I mean,
the original FIFA,
left,
like
right.
you say. I mean, and that's always sort of had some form of sort of control of the ball, and
you could string.
It came out very similar sort of time to Brutal Deluxe. I mean, that
you must have done
like 91, 92 or something. It was around similar sort of time. I mean,
you mentioned in the first part that Speedball started off life as a type of tennis game. And most tennis games are vertical. I wonder if they just started, and I don't know. I'm sure they had their reasons. But even on FIFA on the Mega Drive, horizontal pitch, left, right, you could string passes together and you could cross the ball and score with a header, I think. But I was just kind of missing that on this game. And there is a version on Steam, which I think was released about 10 years ago, but that doesn't seem to have much innovation there. But I could see that. I'm surprised that there isn't a newer version, because you could do a lot of that whole management aspect, and with virtual coins. I could imagine a free-to-play version of this game where you can buy packs, you could buy coins, and you could unlock characters and different players through a kind of a loot box mechanic. Opening a kind of a packet of cards and seeing what player you've got, and keep playing to get more coins, so you could get more characters, more different players, and keep playing that way. But there isn't. I couldn't find another similar game to it. I don't see any kind of modern versions of Speedball.
No, although I'm not sure of the name of the game, so I'm not massively up on the modern games, but it somewhere in the back of my mind, it sort of vaguely reminded me of that game where it's cars, where you're sort of trying to you sort of hit a giant ball into a net.
Yes.
I can't think of the name. Gosh. I'm sure everyone's screaming it at us.
Rocket League.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's somehow, I did, whilst playing it, I was trying to think of this very subject you just brought up of, what is it like?
Rocket League.
And I did suddenly think, it kind of sort of is like that, in that it's very blind. It's a bit like we talked about with the other games where you got the leap of faith. There, as you say, there is no real way of seeing where you're passing. If you're very, very lucky, because it's a fairly fast game, I think that's one of its main appeals. It doesn't muck about. It's a pretty quick game. You can forgive any of the sort of lag or whatever you get on playing it on different formats, but it certainly wasn't like that on the Amiga. It was very lag free and it was quick. It was a fast paced game. It wasn't, I mean, in fact, if you look at FIFA on the Mega Drive, I think you'll probably be surprised how slow it is.
No, I bet the first version of FIFA is brilliant. We could play that.
No, I'd rather look at Jonah Barrington squash on the Spectrum rather than play FIFA on the Mega Drive.
Oh, FIFA, it'll be great. I played that a lot. Yeah, but I'm sure that's the one.
But if you were to actually bring this back, Chris, if you say talking about making a Speedball 3, would you actually say to yourself, okay, yeah, we'll scrap the up-down screen, we'll do it left to right instead? Would that still be Speedball?
Yeah. I mean, I would be tempted, if I think about it straight away, I'd be tempted to make, you think, a mobile phone version, right? So you could still go vertical then, because the screen is generally going to be played vertical. Drawback on the mobile is, of course, we spoke before about the virtual joypad, but also on the mobile, it would be really good for the whole kind of collecting the coins. So if I think of a free-to-play reimagining of Speedball, then yeah, you could do the whole kind of improving your team, the squad management, the buying the coins, the packs, unlocking new characters, and then the matches could be quite short. Yeah, I'm thinking something like Brawl Stars kind of thing from Supercell. But yeah, on the piece on a console, yeah, why not make it? I think it would need to be horizontal if it's on the console. Everyone's just used to playing FIFA and that kind of thing, right? I think it'd be, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see someone try. I guess it's nothing like it at all, but there's Blood Bowl on the P. I think there's a new version of Blood Bowl coming, and it is nothing like it. Of course, I don't even know why I mention it, but just, what other sports games, what fantasy sports games are there? And there's Blood Bowl and Speedball. I can't think of another fantasy, unless there's something on Steam, an indie kind of game. I'm surprised there isn't an indie game, because this is something that does attract people's attention, right? The whole rollerball, and there's no way they were not influenced by rollerball. It came out in 1974, as we saw, and there was a remake of that film as well. But yeah, I'm sure there's
Brutal Deluxe.
I would have thought there's an appetite for this sort of thing, a bit of violence in sport.
What do you mean violence? There's no violence. We are a nice, respectable group of lads who come out here to entertain you people. I mean, just look behind me, that arena. There's nobody in there. We haven't even started yet. All these cuts and bruises on me are from trying to put on this outfit. I mean, you lot insist on us wearing this sort of thing. You try putting this on without getting a few cuts and bruises. God, this ball's heavy.
Yeah, but then I suppose that's also, rugby games, anything, they just don't, they've not worked well. I just think, I just found the other games we looked at so far, there was a moment, there was a kind of old man rage about them because they were just annoying or frustrating, but they were kind of good. And this one's just a bit disappointing, because I do have good fond memories, but I just found it to be a bit dull.
Yeah. I was saying one note, wasn't I? It was a sort of
absolutely.
It just I didn't need to play any more of it, but not for the same reasons that I don't want to play any more of the other games that we were just talking about, just like you referenced, because they were annoying or hard, or I just don't need to play any more of it, because I've scratched the itch of, oh yes, I remember Speedball, and it was still, what I played of it actually was still fun, but very, very briefly. And yeah, you need to play it with somebody else, and somebody else who's actually into playing it and has played. So if me and you got together, we're on different sides of the planet. If we actually got to play it together, we probably would play it and probably would enjoy it. How long we would play it for, I doubt we'd play it for the 2 or 3 hours. I seem to remember sat in front of an Amiga getting hot, playing it for hours. I'm just not sure that would happen. I really don't. That's unfortunately, I think, pretty much both of our conclusions about this game. Really, it's not. It hasn't aged well in a single player sports game. It's just too limited. I think boring is the wrong word. That's a bit insulting. It's just not the fun, exciting game I remember it being, and I just couldn't face playing this on my own any longer, really.
I mean, that's what I could have done as well. Some aftertouch on there you go. If there's something I can really get my teeth into, why doesn't Speedball 2 have aftertouch?
And
they did have Speedball 1 and dribbling. As I'm saying, here in California, lacrosse seems to be a bit of a thing, and maybe a futuristic lacrosse game would be the way to go.
Futuristic?
Because you get sticks.
Isn't that Windjammers? Yeah. Windjammers? Wasn't that sort of futuristic?
Yeah, how about futuristic lacrosse? Hockey? Yeah, like, cross between UFC and field hockey.
Hockey, Brutal Deluxe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was about, unfortunately, a bit kind of bland, which is strange because we started off speaking about how great this kind of rock star image of the Bitmap Brothers, and they did, and it's got a good aesthetic. It starts off well, it's like the intro, but it's like buying a heavy metal album, and when you play it, it sounds like Cliff Richards.
What, you mean timeless? always a number one hit every Christmas. You mean that?
Yeah. No, not in this case. No, it was got like elevator music or something. I don't know. It's just a shame. It was a great game, of course. Context at the time, it was great. It was fun. That's another point. You on the Amiga would have played it with a joystick, and I wonder if that's better with a joystick than a D-pad.
That's
as well.
Interesting. Yeah,
I found the D-pad a bit strange.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. It certainly would have been designed with that in mind. I think, again, like I was saying about it, the conversion from Amiga to Mega Drive, when it was built on the Amiga, they would have presumably had a joystick in mind when they were making this game.
Yeah, I think a joystick would have been better. But yeah, that's Speedball 2.
Yeah, I think we ripped a hole in that deluxe game as much as we can. I think we've been as brutal with it as we possibly can in my excellent red top hilarious puns there. I think that's as good as we're going to get. I think if anyone violently disagrees with us, they probably will tell us in the comments, and please do. I think, like a lot of people out there, they probably do remember Speedball with some fond memories, and I haven't come away from this experience with any less fond memories of it, just that it's not a game I need to play anymore.
Everyone else on the internet seems to enjoy these retro games.
Do they? Is it just us? It's only us on the internet that finds the old retro games annoying and hard. I don't think we're unique. Far from it.
So, what game do you think we should cover next, Phil?
I don't know. You choose this time. Come on, something from the Spectrum, considering they were called Spectrum Days. I think something from there, please. Ready? A game that we like, that's easy, and that we're going to like. Please, guaranteed. I want you to guarantee it, please.
This one is guaranteed.
Go on.
This one, Way of the Exploding Fist.
Brilliant game. Best game ever.
I know, it's going to be amazing.
It is. I'm so
guaranteed.
Pleased you picked that. You can email us at hello@spectrumdays.com, and you can contact us on Twitter @SpectrumDaysPod. And you can also find us on YouTube just by looking up Spectrum Days.